DelCOG was established in 2006 as a nonpartisan coalition of journalists, news organizations, public officials, private citizens, and other organizations who believe that government of the people, by the people, and for the people should be open to the people. As stated in our mission statement, the Delaware Coalition for Open Government is committed to promoting and defending the people's right to transparency and accountability in government. We serve as a resource through education and advocacy and work to strengthen Delaware's Freedom of Information Act and its application. I took over as interim president in January 2023 and was elected to a 2-year term in 2024. I am so thankful to all of my fellow board members, as this is a team organization and we are all volunteers who care deeply about these issues. Our board includes Vice President Al Jackson, Treasurer Anita Rush, Directors John Flaherty, Sharon Kwiatkowski, Coralie Pride, and Nick Wasilewski. Also would like to thank our advisory board members, Bill Cortez, Dave Finger, Catherine Ward, and retired state representative John Kowalko. I would also like to thank all those who have supported DelCOG in the past year for making it possible for us to work on so many issues. We did a lot and accomplished a lot in the past year, and I can't wait to see what we achieve in 2025. Especially when it comes to legislation, we have a new governor and many new faces in Dover, and there will be a lot of opportunities to expand government transparency and accountability in the next legislative session, which starts in January. For the past few years, DelCOG's biggest campaign has been pushing for the creation of an Office of the Inspector General, or OIG, to provide oversight of Delaware agencies and investigate waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement. Delaware desperately needs an independent and nonpartisan Office of the Inspector General who will report the findings to the public. Inspectors General are commonplace in most of the country, but Delaware is unfortunately one of only 15 states without one at either the state or local levels. While Delaware has a few agencies, including the elected offices of Attorney General and State Auditor, as well as the Public Integrity Commission, these agencies are limited and have specific oversight functions. These offices deserve to be supported and expanded, but they are focused on specific issues such as routine financial auditing, and they do not fulfill the role of an Inspector General. In the past, DelCOG has held multiple events, panel discussions, and meetings between stakeholders regarding a Delaware Inspector General. We have worked with the National Associations of Inspectors General, and we have written a chapter for a book on various aspects of the OIGs that is being edited by Professor Robin Kemp from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. We've also had numerous op-eds and letters published in local newspapers. We even drafted model legislation to create the strongest, most independent OIG in the country. In 2022, we were proud to support HB 405, which had bipartisan sponsors and passed unanimously out of the House committee. Unfortunately, the bill never received a vote by the full House. In 2024, Senator Laura Sturgeon introduced SB 21, an updated and even stronger version of the prior bill, and DelCOG once again advocated for this important legislation, along with over a dozen other good government groups. The bill once again had bipartisan sponsors and was released unanimously out of committee, but unfortunately, it once again did not receive a vote on the Senate floor this time. Fortunately, this year, Senator Sturgeon will once again introduce a bipartisan bill to create a Delaware OIG. I believe that this is the year an OIG will become a reality. Governor-elect Matt Meyer has strongly supported the creation of this office and has promised to support legislation creating it. However, the public still needs to let our state legislators know that we support creating this office. We, the public, need them to adequately fund this office and ensure it is independent and nonpartisan. In states that have OIGs, they actually save taxpayer money because they are able to recoup misspent funds. So not only is this a good investment for our state budget, but it will increase public trust and make sure that our government is transparent and accountable. If you'd like to learn more about the Inspector General, as well as what you can do to make your voice heard, please visit our website at delcog.org/OIG. Now, there are many reasons why Delaware needs an Inspector General, and we got another one this year with the cover-up of the embezzlement at the Delaware Department of Labor. In May of this year, a whistleblower came forward to disclose that over $180,000 had been stolen from the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, and despite audits and reports on the department since that criminal activity had occurred, this criminal activity was never disclosed to the public. Delaware Code explicitly requires agencies such as the Department of Finance and the Auditor of Accounts to report illegal activity in their written reports. But our government officials failed to do this for over a year, and they only did so after the whistleblower came forward to WHYY reporters. Since then, DelCOG, along with groups such as the Civic League of Newcastle County, has repeatedly asked for investigations into why Delaware officials did not follow the law and why this illegal activity was not reported as required. However, as of today, there has been no explanation of how this failure occurred, and no one has been held accountable for the failure to disclose. There are still multiple questions that need to be answered, including why did high-ranking officials fail to disclose this embezzlement as required by law? And was there political pressure to hide this embezzlement from the public? DelCOG will continue to push for investigations into this by the Delaware General Assembly and the United States Department of Labor Office of the Inspector General. In addition to these two issues, DelCOG has been working on many other topics in the past year. We are always serving as a resource to assist individuals and organizations with navigating the Delaware Freedom of Information Act, also known as FOIA. We have also been raising awareness about the encryption of police and government radio transmissions, which will prevent citizens and news media from up-to-date reporting in Delaware. We have been staying updated on the implementation of the Corporate Transparency Act of 2021, which is being enforced by the U.S. Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, also known as FinCEN. DelCOG helped to get this legislation passed, and upon full implementation, it will require the disclosure of companies' owners to allow for investigations into issues such as fraud and money laundering. We have also advocated against the proposed renovations to the Delaware General Assembly, which would nearly double the size at a cost to taxpayers of over $130 million for a building that is used less than 45 days out of the year. We supported 3 bipartisan good government bills introduced by Representative Eric Morrison. These include HB 291, which would require employer and job titles for political campaign contributors and increase the ability of the public to report campaign finance violations. HB 292, which would require the Department of Elections to review campaign finance reports that are submitted to them. And HB 319, which would require state agencies, the legislature, and the judiciary to develop policies restricting nepotism. While 291 and 319 were successfully signed into law this past year, 292 unfortunately stalled in a House committee. We are currently working on fixing 2 bills that passed this past year that will impair citizens' right to know. These include Senate Bill 13, which created the Hospital Quality and Health Equity Assessment Commission, which will determine appropriate taxation of hospitals. The bill, however, would allow for private meetings between the commission and the hospitals in violation of Delaware's current open meeting laws. In addition, House Bill 311 created criminal penalties for carrying firearms on university properties. The issue with this is that the public may not know which properties are owned by universities, such as the University of Delaware, which owns many LLCs. I would like to extend a thank you to Amy Rowe for bringing these bills to the attention of DelCOG, and we hope to submit letters to the legislator advocating for fixes to these. DelCOG has also looked into the ongoing issues at the Christina School Board, which has repeatedly failed to follow the open meeting laws for public bodies. We are encouraged that several state public officials have been working on this issue as well, and we hope that there will be further investigations into those problems. Finally, we sponsored the League of Women Voters League Day in Dover, which was held in March and focused on disinformation in our modern democracy. DelCOG has also continued to add more information to our website at delcog.org to help the public stay informed about open government issues in the state and how to take action on them. You can also find a lot of information about our organization, and within the next few months, we should have our written annual report on there. Financially, DelCOG ended October with $10,039.89 in our bank accounts. As a small organization, we have been exploring ways to increase our annual budget so we can take on more activities, including a legal support fund to ensure enforcement of Delaware's open government laws. If you would like to donate to DelCOG, please visit our website to learn more. You are able to donate online or by check. If you would like to join DelCOG, please let us know as well. You can send us an email or submit your information through our website. The only requirement for membership in DelCOG is that you believe that our government should be open and accountable to we the people. Please also consider joining our mailing list and also like and follow us on Facebook to stay up to date on open government issues. Thank you. Finally, I would like to extend another thank you to all those who have supported DelCOG in advocating for open government and advancing the public's right to know how their government operates. I want to extend a sincere appreciation to all of you who have dedicated your time, efforts, and resources to this important cause, as your help is the only way that we're able to get things done. Now, at last, I would like to introduce our featured speaker. I'm sure you're all done with me speaking, but our featured speaker, Mr. Daniel Bevarly. Dan is an expert in public communications and open government, and his career includes extensive experience in public administration and civic engagement, spanning the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. He is the founder and CEO of the Democracy Kitchen, which brings together diverse audiences with conflicting views to facilitate collaboration and problem solving between the government, the press, and the public. He previously served as the executive director of the National Freedom of Information Coalition, of which DelCOG is a member. Tonight, Dan is going to present on the Inspector General, Guardian of the Public Trust, which will be followed by our Q&A. If you have any questions you would like Dan to answer, please put them in the chat and I will read them out during the Q&A. And so without further ado, let me bring Dan into this focus and we should be able to get going. All right, and so Mr. Bevarly, I believe you need to unmute your video and then I should be, there we go. All right, and so replace spotlight. And I will have to also ask to unmute you. Oops. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to, just went away. Where's the option to unmute? I'm sorry, Mr. Bevarly. Give me 1 second. You should be able to unmute yourself, Mr. Bevarly.
Ah, there we go. Can you hear me, John?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, take it away. And thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Well, it's good to be back in Delaware, even if it's just virtual. I was there, for some of you all that may remember, I was there, I think, Catherine, it was maybe 2018. At that time when I was still director at NFOIC and came up there on your invitation and had an opportunity to meet with the wonderful people there with DelCOG and just a lot of the hospitality that you all afforded me. I really appreciated that and enjoyed that visit. I think at the time I was up there, you all were embroiled in the Rodney Square bus hub issue. And again, another really important public cause that you all, stewarded to the best that you could. A lot of challenges out there, but I just wanted to say hi again to Catherine and to Nick. Nick, looking back at when I was at NFOIC, I was thinking about, I think you're the first guy that I knew that had COVID when we were getting into that phase with things going on there. And of course, things went well, but yeah, I remember those days. John, thank you for invitation and to be here tonight too. And I just want to compliment the whole DelCOG organization and all the volunteers because, this is just really a challenging area that we find ourselves in, and the accomplishments, I was looking over the materials that Catherine had sent me and the work, I remember the LLC Act, the work that you all were doing there. And of course, Rodney, the square, and then the asbestos works there at Boxwood Road, which was after my time there, and then now the lead in the school drinking water, and then what John was talking about here with this recent case with the missing funds from the unemployment trust. These are all huge public issues, and one of the things that I think about is that DelCOG is not just only advancing the public's interest in these things; they're also there for the public's well-being. When it comes to our relationship with our government. So good evening, residents of the First State. Our election's over, and even though you're the first state, I know you all are also excited to have another first with the election and the Senator-elect Lisa Blunt Rochester going to be representing you in the Senate. I think that's just great. That's historical, and it's something that we want to see happen going forward there. And it's just an important time for us. Of course, we're all still trying to appreciate what the heck is going to be happening with this new administration coming in. I teach American government at the Florida Gulf Coast University, and trying to talk to my students. I was talking to Catherine today, and I said, Catherine, there's the generation that we have now that are freshmen coming into college and taking American government classes. They really don't know a government that hasn't been without the kind of polarization and the conflict that we have today, and that, the struggles that we have between these political parties, and, going from calling people their colleagues to calling them their enemies. It's really a challenge for us. And so, we have a new administration coming in. We'll see where that goes. I'm interested to see how that impacts federal FOIC work that's going on at the level, and how that might trickle down into the states in that. But tonight's topic that you've asked me to address, the Inspector General and Guardian of the Public Trust. One thing I've learned and understand from you all, and the tenacity that you have, is it's going to happen. I know the efforts in 22 and 24, but it's something that is going to happen. I can't see how it can. I mean, you all are the perfect state, for something like this to succeed, and everything you all have been doing, what I've been reading on the work you've done, and that you're on the right track. And so there's really nothing I can come in to tell you about the Office of the Inspector General that you don't already know. I mean, I remember from our days when we were working there, and we were talking with the Association of Inspector Generals. And I'll never forget, what the executive director at the time said. He said, you have to understand, even though you have 38 states and the District of Columbia that have inspector generals, when you look at one Office of Inspector General, you're looking at one Office of Inspector General. And so, again, as you all know, the role of the Inspector General is varied across the different state jurisdictions. The roles they have, the powers they have, go from state to state to state. And I'm glad to hear, John, that you said that your office is going to be, the critical type of enforcement and everything else that I think is really critical. I think of Stephen Smith down in Louisiana, who was president at the time, and his office had a lot of the traits that look to be important for an inspector general to have, to really be able to do their job and to be taken serious in what they do. So even though we're going to talk about the inspector as the guardian of the public trust, I want to add another little asterisk there, and I want to also call this the Inspector General, the pinnacle of government insider. Okay, we'll expand on that. So public trust, right? We know accessibility, transparency, accountability, all that found in government, right? But it also relies on government's responsiveness to the public that it serves. And it's only as responsive to the people that serve in government in terms of how responsive they are. And we know, we know how challenging this continues to become in today's society, especially in today's digital society in terms of that. I mean, you guys are on the front line every day on this stuff. Let me just give a little bit of my background because it relates to where I wanted to take the conversation today. But I've been very much involved in public service throughout my life. My education was in criminal justice and public administration. I worked for local government in Louisville, Kentucky, served in the mayor's office for many years and in economic development. I left there and went to work for a public affair. I founded a public affairs company, public relations, and worked in nonprofits and public sector there. Moved to Florida, went to work for a public policy think tank. Then I started working with the Florida Coalition for Open Government, and that led me to the National Freedom of Information Coalition, and came in there and started to work with them as a consultant. And then when the opportunity arose in 2016, I became the executive director. And then that, of course, brought me in touch with DelCOG and all the other state coalitions there. And as I mentioned, as a professor, an adjunct professor at Florida Gulf Coast University. So excuse me for just a minute. So I've been passionate about this area in terms of good governance and transparency and looking at it from both sides. I mean, you can imagine, you know, when I came into working for NFOIC, the whole board were journalists. They all had journalism backgrounds. And here I came in with this public sector background. Not only public sector background, I was a former PIO. You know, I can hear the boos already. But it afforded me the opportunity to kind of see this inside on the government side. And I dealt with a number of journalists. I got you know, caught up in a number of open records requests and dealing with that. And then here I was on NFOIC working to try to drive those through. And believe me, we aren't that great, you know, when it comes to being transparent and open, you know, especially when you work for elected officials in that. And the coalitions, you know, the coalitions in NFOIC working on shoestring budgets, you know, but they have the passion and the drive, and they're dedicated to serving their state citizens and the press associations in those states. And at the same time, dealing with these governments that are playing cat and mouse games, treating public information like it's proprietary in that. So, I mean, I was 100% in to what we were doing with NFOIC. And, you know, I just admired the work that all the different coalitions were out there doing in that. What I saw was that there only tended to be this not only, but we always tended to go through this area of litigation. That was the only recourse that we had. We can't get the information, you know, we need this, we have to litigate. And of course, you know, the legislature caught on to this as well, and they started to change these laws, and they started to make getting access to public information more and more difficult. Now, litigation is important. It's a tool that should always be there, but it's expensive. And we know what's happened in our industry, especially in the journalism industry, since 2000. And the other thing is about litigation is it's a one-off, okay? You win a case and then you go for that next case in that. So one of the things that I wanted to do, being on and this relates to where we're going here, is this, you know, to try to look at the culture within these public institutions. Could they be changed? Could we address some things? And what I learned is that you've got to have somebody on the inside. You know, you can have that friendly legislator. You can have some of these other groups that are interested in doing that, but you really need to have somebody on the inside that's doing this every day when they walk into government, and hence that's the role of the inspector general. And so when I was at NFOIC, it wasn't necessary to go after the inspector general at the time. That was through DelCOG. But I started to make contacts with groups that I had worked with in other previous jobs here, but to start to build relationships with the National Association of Attorney Generals, National Conference of State Legislatures, the National Association of Counties, and to work with them to try to pitch that, you know, this message was that greater transparency could be a win-win for both government and for the public. But at the same time, this knowing that you need to have that person on the inside. And so when Nick and Catherine started to talk about the work that DelCOG was doing about wanting to establish an OIG in Delaware, the AIG was a group that I had not thought about, but looking more into this as executive director, I really felt that that was a strong path for us to pursue for not only the way I wanted to run NFOIC in terms of building relationships, but here was this ultimate insider that we should be looking at for just not Delaware, but for all of our members and the coalitions. And then again, what the other ones in the states that already had the OIGs, what was their relationship with those inspector generals there? So NFOIC being a national organization, we were in the best position to be able to pursue this at the national level in that. And so with Catherine and with Nick and with others there, you know, we started to be knocking on AIG's door. We you know, I remember Nick coming down here and going to the annual meeting and meeting with the other inspector generals and just learning how things worked. You know, AIG was definitely the group that had the insiders there. But again, a lot of them, I think a lot at AIG really didn't appreciate the transparency role that they could play, not just on the ethic and the enforcement and the legal side of what's going on, but there was a good opportunity for inspector generals to pick up that transparency, you know, tool that could be played. So we were kind of teaching them at the same time while we were learning about it from us. Unfortunately, two things happened at NFOIC at around that time. One is there wasn't a lot of buy-in from the board to continue to move these relationships forward with these other groups. You know, I think it took some time. I mean, I was making great inroads with the National Association of Government Communicators and the Society of Professional Journalists, you know, two groups that never really talked to each other. There were some opportunities there and some interest to do that. And then also COVID hit. And our resources became very thin. We had a lot of our funders had pulled back on our funding and that. And so, you know, not wanting to go where I wanted to go, and the funding thing was like time to step aside. So Democracy Kitchen. I wanted to continue to stay in this area because I really believe that's what we had to do to try to make these transparency reforms happen, is we needed to work closer with the people who were holding on to that information. You know, they're the only game in town, right? And litigation, we just couldn't continue to litigate and litigate. It was becoming more challenging at that. So just a real brief off ramp about Democracy Kitchen, and then we'll get back to the story here. So the idea is simple: pursuing transparency reform by focusing on the challenges of democracy and transparency. So how does this happen? Well, on paper, it's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward, but as you can appreciate in practice, it's very difficult. So let me just, if I can get you to put your hats on, your civic hats, your American government hats on again, and think about that triangle of the three branches of government, using that to explain how this process can move forward here. Of course, with that original triangle, we have the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Now, take those names off of there, and instead of the triangle representing government, think of the triangle representing democracy. And the three key players with democracy and really shaping democracy in this country is, of course, government at one of those pinnacles, society at another one, and the news media at the other one. Now think about the founders' plan for checks and balances over those three branches of government. And you can see how these different groups relate to one each other. The media in terms of communicating to the public in terms of supporting or not supporting the media, government on the other side needing the media to communicate to the public, and at the same time, the media needing content from government. And then, of course, the same thing between the government and the public out there. So you've got that scenario. So now take each one of those points and think about the dysfunction and the conflict going on within each one of them on the ideology, on the political ideology side, the polarization that we have, the left and the right media, the left and the right government, the families and friends who find themselves arguing over these things. So we have a lot of stuff going on here at the time here. But the point is, all three of those groups interact and work together or not in terms of either advancing or diminishing democracy in this country. So let me get back to this. So the thing is, whether it's major decisions around this or an inspector general, right? Where does that play in? How does that play in the role of an inspector general? Well, again, it's this insider that we need to have in there, because we know there's enough people that are there to kind of prevent these reforms from happening, and we need somebody on the inside, and an inspector general fits that bill. But looking at those three groups, the way I wanted to kind of to move forward and to kind of finish out here, I was reading the literature that Catherine sent me, and particularly the chapters, the chapter that they had written for the book that's going to be coming out, John and Nick and Catherine. And at the end of the chapter, there are 4 questions that are posed to the reader. And so I think it might help if I try to address those based on that concept that I was talking about the role that each one of these groups play to help advance, not only to secure the role and to secure an OEG in Delaware, but also to make it a successful job and keep it going and make it successful. So there are 4 questions. The first question was, what are the political or special interest forces that continue to resist a more open government in Delaware? Okay, so among these 3 groups, you all are already addressing them. You know, I saw the stuff that was going on, and again, you're hitting the right stakeholder groups. You're working with them, and so I can't really tell you mechanically things. You know, you've got that model down. What I would say, though, is that in each one of these groups, there has to be a tailored message for those groups in terms of what's in it for them. And not only a tailored message for them, but a Delaware tailored message. You know, you could take a template and put it across other jurisdictions on here's how you go through this process. But you all know what's important to your media. You know what's important to your residents. You know what's important to your public officials to be able to make this thing and work together on this one big push to, you know, to secure this position here. So if you think about government, all three branches play a critical role to enhance, you know, an inspector general in that position, to be that watchdog, to secure that public trust, to watch over that, and to help improve government and you know, be a steward for good governance and ethical governance there. You know, the judicial branch, whether it's the legislative branch and its executive branch, you know, given this person the independence that they need, the legal protections that they need, the funding that's critical to be able to, I know that was one of the things that was talked about in the 24 effort about the funding not being there. So obviously the funding is very critical for something like that to happen, the authority that they're going to be able to need to be able to carry this out with the investigative powers, a way to ensure the transparency around that position and what's going on there. And again, to, you know, like with the case with the $185,000 coming forward, being able to encourage and support whistleblowers and protect them when they uncover wrongdoing and they need a resource to be able to report what's going on. And then at the same time, the IG being there to help support collaboration across those three branches of government are critical. Now, what about the news media? So news media plays an essential role in this as well. They can be there to help publicize what the efforts of the IG is doing, he or her, reporting their findings, reporting cases and highlighting government accountability, being the lead to talk about the challenges that you all are dealing with, the efforts there, whether it's the Rodney Square or whether it's the lead in the drinking water. They're there to educate the public and promote what's going on. They're also a platform for the whistleblowers as well. And a lot of the stuff is going to fuel their investigative efforts in terms of what they're doing to develop content, to develop stories and complement that. And again, they can help facilitate public pressure on government around this. They can also be there to help track legislation. You know, following this legislation through the legislative session could be, you know, really critical to continue to maintain support and maintain public awareness. And again, they're there to help ensure government transparency going forward. And then the public. What role does the public play? You know, they need to be staying informed and engaged. You all are doing that. They can be strong advocates for an OEG. They, on the other side, can also be reporting misconduct and wrongdoings in government when they see it happening. And, you know, who do they go to? You know, who do they talk to? Who do they approach when something like that happens? They, at the same time, can support whistleblower protections going forward. And they can also be engaging with the media and their public officials through public meetings and public forums. I know you all have held a number of public meetings and forums around the state. And, you know, and you may be doing this probably, but when you're going into an area, whether you're meeting with a group of constituents, you know, is the representatives for those constituents also there? Is the local media that reports and that those people follow, are they at those forums there as well? To be able to bring those groups together at the same time as you are informing and educating the public out there. And again, they, you know, making good citizens out of your residents is critical in terms of their roles and responsibilities. You know, the challenge around misinformation and disinformation, you know, how do you use technology to leverage what you are doing to help, you know, advance those efforts that are going on there. So second question, will some state offices claim an OIG would duplicate their missions? All these state offices should be welcoming an independent IG to be able to come in and support their mission. Again, it takes some of that self-policing, some things that could be negative cultures within these agencies having to do that themselves, you know, beyond areas of public information, but areas of ethics violations or legal violations and that to be able to hand something over to an independent overseer instead of doing something on the inside. It's just cleaner, and it also gives a more openness, presence of what government is doing in terms of policing itself here. And, you know, the AIG and other states that have inspector general should have some data on this already from their times that they're doing, and being able to, you know, pass that along to your stakeholders. And the third question was, how can executive and legislative leadership support be marshaled to advance a state OIG bill into law? Well, this should be addressed through some of the efforts mentioned earlier. But again, the tack that I was doing at NFOIC in terms of supplementing that by bringing in outside peer groups with the different government positions within the state that have some type of influence on us, whether it's legislative or whether it's executive or whether it's judicial, bringing in support from the other 38 states, bringing in inspector generals, legislators to talk to your groups there to share their experiences. And then let's not forget those national organizations like National Governors Association, the attorneys general, the secretaries of states. All of these groups have national organizations that can talk about some of the experience of inspector generals, or should be able to talk about the impact of inspector generals there. So again, it's going beyond your borders, but again, you're still bringing in those peer groups that have influence on the ones that you're trying to influence there. And then the final question that was asked is, what are the powers that be afraid of? Well, you know, that's an easy one. We know the answer to that one. It's having to relinquish some control, having greater transparency, and having more accountability with what's going on. And that's something that, you know, government is really fearful of, but at the same time, that's the job, right? And an inspector general, you know, can play that role to be able to help change that culture and advance that kind of culture that can go beyond some of the traditional roles of the IG, but hopefully can also improve general transparency and access throughout state government and the other ones there. So an OIG in Delaware is going to happen. I believe it, and you believe it. And, you know, Delaware is the best state to make this thing happen. You know, your size, the politics there, the passion, the dedication, the hard work that's already been done by DelCOG and all the other members. You know, you got a lot working for you and going in your favor. And I'll just close by saying good luck in 2025 and hope things go well for you all. And again, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight to join you all.
Thank you so much for that. That was really an excellent overview, I think, of a lot of these the important reasons why Delaware needs an office of the Inspector General. And I love that you brought up so many of the issues that DelCOG has been fighting for, because so much of DelCOG's work, since it's all about accountability and transparency, almost every issue we deal with is an issue that would apply directly to something the Inspector General could be looking at and looking into and providing more information, not just to the public, but also importantly to our news media, which, is something that's so desperately needed when we're seeing these kind of staffing cuts and stuff like that in our news media. When they're already facing budget struggles, what you said, it hit home very personally for me, because I've talked to many reporters who say that they're not able to do the kind of litigation that they used to be able to do a decade ago or 2 decades ago, because they don't have the money for it anymore. And at the same time, you have that closing of our governments in a lot of ways, the efforts to make them less transparent. And so when you have those combined, it's an exponential kind of impact that it has on the ability for the public to know how their government works.
Yeah, and John, and that's the good point, because if you think about it, I mean, litigation is the important tool that we still have, especially the news media has, as well as the public. But I remember at one of our annual meetings for NFOIC, we had an attorney with the Cincinnati Enquirer who said that they average around $32,000 in legal fees to fight for a public record request and to get the information and that's just it's a lot of money. And the thing is, litigation is a one-off. You go to the next one, you go to the next one, you go to the next one. When if you have that insider in there who can help change culture within the organization, and that again, it's just it's not only a financial opportunity for government and for the news media, but again, it's a way to just business ought to be done that way. You know, it just shouldn't be this friction that has to happen every time when we don't have access to, you know, to our information and to our public officials.
Yeah. And one question that I received is, and this has been an ongoing debate a little bit in Delaware regarding our OIG bill. But I would love to know, in your experience, how other states have dealt with oversight of the judiciary, and whether OIGs have a role to play with oversight of the judiciary. And if not, then how would that oversight be done?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have looked at some legislation out there, enabling legislation on some of these inspector generals, and I have not found any that the judicial branch seems to be a part, or there's some other kind of organization or group or whatever that represents the legislature in these type of things, but not that direct oversight that an inspector general has. Not to say that that isn't in other ones, and depending on probably whatever the topic might be, but I have not seen, it's mostly been, you know, the executive and legislative branches that the inspector general has those powers to deal with. A lot of immunity on the judicial side.
Yeah. And in terms of independence, what have you seen, and what recommendations would you have for Delaware? Currently in Delaware, one of the main mechanisms that has been proposed to keep our inspector general independent is an independent nominating committee, where there would be a group of a lot of, you know, some state officials, as well as some community organizations and representatives from them. They would come together and nominate 3 individuals, who then the governor would choose one of those 3 people to, you know, send to the Senate. And of course, on the other side of that is the removal process, where they could only be removed from office for cause. And I believe the most recent bills required a vote by both houses of the General Assembly as well. So our sort of ideas to get independence were, you know, the nominating and the removal process. You know, do you have any advice on those, or any other types of advice for how to maintain that independence?
Yeah, I think what you all have set up is a strong way to do that. I think on these committees, you know, you need to have, I would highly recommend representation among the different branches of government, so that you've got somebody from the judiciary, you've got somebody on the legislative side and the executive side. And then at the same time, perhaps even to reach out to, you know, a non-government, you know, person who could be on that group there. And then of course, that recommendation does go back to the governor. But at the same time, it shouldn't be the governor that, you know, it should, if that's the ultimate decision on there, that still the ultimate decision for removal must come back to that committee. You know, in terms of any kind of affairs, whatever that has to be dealt with, that you need that distance from the executive in these governments, because not only for 2 reasons. One is to make it, you know, the perception there that there's not anything going on there for, you know, the closeness between that person and the governor. But at the same time, for continuity after an administration were to leave and change, you know, you don't want to have to come back and put an inspector general in every time. That person should have some continuity in that position.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do believe that the proposal for our OIG would be 5-year terms, which is, you know, exactly to avoid that, you know, turnover as soon as a new governor comes in. If they want to do something shady, they will still have to at least deal with that old inspector general for hopefully at least a couple of years.
Yeah, and even a role for the public to participate in that process, or to be informed about that in terms of what's going on, you know, and that could be a diverse group of individuals, maybe from Chamber of Commerce, League of Women Voters, maybe union groups, whatever, you know, good governance groups, Common Cause. I know they've been active in this up there. Some of your stakeholders would be a good role. DelCOG would be a great representative on this group as well, but it almost as an advisory type of committee to the government group.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. And a question that we got from Nick is, have you found that political expediency interferes with timely and cost-effective open records requests? And could an Office of the Inspector General provide oversight for FOIA violations by state agencies?
I would hope. I would hope that's where that goes. Definitely. I think that's critical. I think, from Nick's, I know Nick's experience, and for those at NFOIC, that role of government, there are just too many outs available for delays and for refusals and other ways that just, the idea of obstacles put in paths of people to get this and to try to tire them out either through time or through money. There has to be some kind of a role where the Inspector General can step in and, address these timelines that, the states have timelines on responding to this, that there is some kind of penalty, that is going to be put in place when these agencies, if they don't follow these rules, and Inspector General would be where I would say that needs to be centralized.
And so do you believe there should be, because one of the debates that we've heard is whether or not inspectors general should be involved in enforcement or whether it should just be more reporting and investigation. What are your opinions on that?
I think enforcement. I think they've got to have some teeth. They really do. And I say that also from what Stephen said in Louisiana, that part of his job just gives him so much more credibility, and people within government are much more responsive, knowing that Inspector General has that ability. And so he said that he's found, compliance and response has greatly increased because of that. So I definitely think they need to have that. It needs to be a powerful position, because of what they're doing and the oversight that they have to take. But again, a lot of responsibility, and there should be a lot of checks and balances for that position. But that person, it should not be just, hey, we have an Inspector General. I mean, if you're going to create, and I know I've seen what you all are putting together there. I mean, it's a very important job. And again, expanding those powers to look at some of these areas around freedom of information and just the general challenge of accessing government. I think the Inspector General needs to have that type. And again, when we were talking with AIG, that was an area that they hadn't really looked at in terms of, a lot of their members playing that role, but definitely seeing that as a logical, expansion for some of the powers within the Inspector General's office.
And I think related to that is, some of the pushback we've received in Delaware is that, well, we already have an auditor of accounts and we already have an attorney general. And for example, the attorney general does, if you have a FOIA complaint, you would initially take it to the attorney general. For financial audits, that's the auditor of accounts. And so there's been some pushback that this office would be redundant. What would be a response to that for why this office is important?
I would say that needs to be centralized to the IG, and then the IG can pass that information to the other agencies based on what's needed to happen. Again, it's not something the AG does every day. It's not, but this is the role that an IG would be doing every day. I remember when I worked in the mayor's office, and we would get an open records request on somebody was always like, send it to the law department, send it to the law department. And then of course they would stall and do what they need to do to try to depending on what the information was. But again, that's not something that they do all the time. It's like, oh, okay, I got this, and I'll get to that. I would much rather see that as more of something that is going to be delegated from the IG to the respective agencies to handle those kind of things. Again, you're centralizing the government's response through the IG. And again, the other agencies are just working to address those particular issues there that they don't deal with on a daily basis.
And have you seen any pushback in other states from either, state agencies like attorneys generals, or from, like the legislative branch or the judiciary branch when there's been an attempt to try to include them in this oversight?
I've not seen that. I mean, I would assume there would be. I haven't seen, because I haven't seen any kind of models that have that type of power over, the Stevens group over the investigative, and then also the powers that he has there, but not when it just comes down to general transparency issues going forward. But I would expect that there would be some pushback. I mean, I think it's a cultural change. But it's something that we really need to look at, because things aren't working out like they should be working out. And we need more insiders, because you all have seen how one insider can just really derail the whole legislative process to getting this bill going through. And so there, an individual can be very powerful in that regard. So let's put the power to do good in the role of the IG and to be able to steward that. I mean, I would expect the right IG would not be beloved by everybody in government, but that would not be the role for that particular person to have.
Yeah. And are there any, additional sort of powers or responsibilities that you think are sort of crucial to be in an OIG? And especially any that you've seen that, maybe have been lacking in other states where Delaware could, start off with, sort of dealing with that at the beginning.
Yeah, John, to be honest, I would not feel that I've got enough understanding of all these groups in terms of what they're doing from top to bottom down there. I mean, generally speaking, I remember that when we met the Inspector General in Tennessee, and I think the only thing he dealt with was Social Security matters, within government. That was it. That was his role. And of course, there's, for want of, he didn't even need to have the term Inspector General for something like that. But I would like to see more of these states. Like I said, we got 38 states in the District of Columbia that are using Inspector Generals. In Florida here, we have a lot of Inspectors General across the state, at the state and the local level. But we don't have anybody that's doing some of the things that you all are looking at for your Inspector General position there. And so I think, again, this kind of leadership role and what you all are putting together, I think, I mean, I hand it to you guys for doing your homework and looking at all the different models out there and putting together something that you think is going to not only work for Delaware, but also for, that could end up being a template for some of these other states to look at.
And thank you. And I just want to mention real quick that Nick put in the chat that every state that has an OIG also has a state attorney general and a state auditor. So clearly they can work together, and those roles can be complementary, not oppository, One question I'd have is, I think this is something that can't be done through legislation, but how do you create a good culture in an office like that? So much, you can have the best intentions, the best written bill, but, what the actual functioning of the office comes down to are the people who are there. And so how can we make sure, and what can the public do, or what can public officials do to make sure that that agency has a positive culture and is really motivated to do the work that needs to be done?
Yeah, I think openness, transparency, a lot of reporting to the public and to other public officials of what's going on there, whether it's monthly reports, the activities of what's going on. I think that's really critical, that you've got to build up that type of transparency and that culture within an organization like that. So that, it almost becomes proactive, in terms of the disclosure of the work that they're doing, as opposed to somebody asking for reports and asking for things going on. That lots of times you're getting the news first from the IG's office, not from, somebody who's working on, in another branch of government, but they're the ones that are on top of it. So very proactive, very transparent, I think, is really critical for something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and just to touch on what Nick was mentioning, maybe there's an opportunity to bring those three groups together, their national offices together, a representative, and have a kind of a conversation about that, and let them talk, what their experience of their members are, and maybe identify where there are some, common ground, or maybe some areas of impediments between those three different groups, whether it's AGs or the auditors, and the inspector generals. It might be an interesting conversation to hear how they make it work in other states.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really good recommendation, especially, the other states as well as those national organizations. I know, obviously we've reached out to a lot of organizations that deal directly with inspectors general in other states, but in terms of the attorneys general and the state auditors in other states, I think that'd be a good avenue to pursue. I believe right now that our Department of Justice is supporting the creation of an Office of the Inspector General after they made some requests that to the bill that was proposed last year. And I think actually the request ended up strengthening the bill, making it a little bit stronger what the OIG would be able to do. But we're still getting some pushback, I believe, from the state auditor. And, I think, unfortunately, part of the pushback in Delaware is that a lot of our oversight agencies are not funded properly. They're already underfunded. They're already understaffed. And so I think sometimes, we also have like the Public Integrity Commission. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe they only have like 1 or 2 full-time paid staff members. And so these are very important organizations, but they're understaffed. And I think some of them may be worried that the OIG is going to further put a strain on their budget and their resources when,
Sure. That's
understand.
Yeah. That's understandable. I mean, the resources are tight. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, that goes beyond the politics, right? That's, the funding on something like that, to think somebody's going to lose for somebody else to be able to benefit from there. So that definitely is an issue that has to be addressed there. The other thing I was just thinking about on the on the different groups. Doggone it, I forgot what I was going to say there. But oh, I know what I was going to ask you. What about the other thing that kind of comes to my mind, because being at NFOIC, when I was at NFOIC, we were always trying to get money to do our work and grants, and that has any kind of outreach to some of these other good governance, good democracy groups, or anything else going on out there, to not necessarily to ask them for the money, but to make them aware of what's going on in Delaware trying to do this, and the focus on this, whether it's through press associations, SPJ, some of these other foundations like Ford or Knight or Democracy Fund, or this whole press forward thing that's been going on now to try to help journalists out and media. This to me seems like something that would be of interest and potentially could get some support from some other groups, if not at least more recognition of what's going on and more awareness out in the industry, whether it's philanthropy or in the news media side. I don't know, but it's,
Yeah. Well, and I know that one thing that we in DelCOG have talked about is getting more, we're relying a little bit more on the press associations. One of our advisory board members, Catherine, is the president of the Delaware Press Association, and obviously both for investigations and oversight, as well as for accountability and transparency. Whether it's an inspectors general, whether it's FOIA organizations. The news media is central to all of that, because, there can be as many investigations and as many reports and, as many FOIA requests, but if the public never finds out about the results of any of that, what is the point of it, And so, building those connections and emphasizing that importance to the public through these connections, I think is a really useful idea. And I think certainly some of those groups that you brought up, I will go back and watch the recording so I can write down all those names and make sure that we follow up with them. Because I think, I think a lot of states, they like to rely on Delaware likes to rely on Delawareans, but at the same time, Delaware doesn't have an inspectors general. So knowing exactly the benefits that could bring and the impact that could have, and potential impact, for example, maybe increasing awareness about some of the a corruption or something like that the General Assembly responds by increasing the budget for the Public Integrity Commission. I think there are knock-on effects that we may see that people in Delaware may not understand, because they're just seeing that competition for resources and not potential other benefits that aren't as clear, but that other states with that experience may have. And so one question I'd have to you, just to sort of bring it a little bit more general, is why is transparency important? I think sometimes it's not something that a lot of people initially think of. Although I think that for people that are involved in these issues and care about it, we realize that transparency connects to almost every issue you can think of. And so, in your opinion, why is transparency important? And, how can the OIG help with that?
Yeah, I think transparency is just, it's the foundation for our democracy and the foundation for government. I mean, if you think about the founders, what other industry has constitutional protection for freedom of the press, in the First Amendment? I mean, it was seen early on that the role and for government transparency was critical to this nation and to the public to make sure that the elected officials behave as they should, that they always put the public first, and that they're being watched and they're being, that they have a responsibility to the citizens of whatever jurisdiction that they represent. And so when you start to dismantle transparency, we see how that, you all see how that impacts in terms of misconduct and, the smokestacks of these agencies and that where, the old, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You don't find out about some of these things, and it can result in lives, health risks, as well as political issues going on. So I think the whole idea of transparency, it's not easy. Nobody wants to look bad. The media is ready to pounce sometimes on some things. I remember, working in government. I mean, this was back in the day when you didn't have all the social media. And, if it was a bad news story, we let it go on Friday at 5 o'clock, because hopefully the people will be out on Friday night and won't see it on the news, or it'll be buried in the Saturday paper. But, you have to step up, and nobody's perfect. And you have to be able to accept, that you're going to have issues going on, and there's going to be problems in that because government's not perfect and the people that work in government aren't perfect. Well, we have a right to know what our government's doing. They're using our taxpayers' dollars. They're there to serve our interest. And once we start to say, we don't care what goes on, behind closed doors, we'll pay for that in the long run. And we already are paying for that in the long run. So I think that's important. I think the founders knew it was important, and we should respect that.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point that I think DelCOG needs to emphasize, is that the founders understood the importance of transparency. Unfortunately in Delaware, we have a long and for a long time celebrated history of secret backroom deals. And it's described in Delaware as the Delaware way.
Yes.
And, a lot of this goes, back to when we were, the corporate state, we were controlled by DuPont, and, a lot of family members and stuff like that. And so, we're, I think, moving away from some of that history. But, two of the questions that were just sent, deal with, what happens when an agency is doing something, especially if it may not rise to the level of a crime or, rise to the level of, ethical misconduct. How can an OIG help bring that to light? And what kind of compliance or enforcement would be possible in those kind of situations? Is it just sort of revealing that, bringing it to light, or are there additional things?
Yeah, if there's no laws that have been broken or violations, that there's some type of recourse that can be taken, towards an official or an agency, just bringing sunlight to that, should be, should work to inform the public of what's going on. And hopefully the elected officials that may have some impact on that are going to take some kind of action on their own. But again, if we're not talking about laws being broken and that, just poor governance, just mismanagement. But, once, yeah, I mean, I think, this situation with the $185,000, I mean, that's certainly something that needs to be, not only brought out, but somebody needs to be held accountable for something like that. And whatever the recourse might be on something like that. But yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, there's incompetence everywhere, unfortunately. And then there's people that excel in public sector in that. And those are the people that we really should reward and recognize for what's going on, because those are the ones that we really should be cheering for. And but keeping an eye on those who don't have our best interest in mind.
Yeah. And we will be having an event next month where we will be awarding some of the people who have, been champions of open government, including a retiring state representative who has done a lot to make open government important. And so, yes, I think it's important that we make sure we highlight those people that are putting in.
Yeah, I agree with NFOIC. That was one of the things we did. We used to recognize an individual each year as for the State Open Government Hall of Fame. And one of the things we did while I was there, we said, look, we get 10, 15 nominations and all of them are deserving. Why just pick one? You know, let's expand this and recognize a lot more people than just one every year, because there's a lot of people that are, and you and I know, you know, a lot of people aren't getting paid for doing this stuff. You know, they're doing it out of their passion for, you know, open government and for the democracy and what they stand for. And so, yeah, I think recognizing these people, and hopefully the media will pick up on that and they'll report that, you know, through their channels, and you know, any other kind of stakeholder groups would do that. I think it's important.
And one of our award honorees is also, we're also awarding a journalist from one of the local papers that has been reporting a lot on the Department of Labor embezzlement issue. Because, you know, obviously the public never would have known about it if it wasn't for our news media. So, I mean, you know, maybe we could have come to light if we had an inspectors general, you know, but, you know, for right now in Delaware, our news media is our only avenue for exposing some of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know how strained their resources are these days.
Yes, yes. Even when they're getting paid to do that work, it's not enough for how the benefit that they bring to the state for that type of work. Yeah, yeah.
And I hope Catherine will be talking about what you all are doing tomorrow when NFOIC has their annual meeting, and
thank you. Yes,
shares with them the good work that you all are doing there. And hopefully there's some support from the organization and also some of the other members that can chime in and lend something to that, you know, that challenge that you all are doing.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing it, because that was what had just slipped my mind. Is I did want to let everyone know on this meeting that tomorrow is the National Freedom of Information Summit. It happens every year, hosted by the National Freedom of Information Coalition. It's a virtual event. I believe it's for all day tomorrow, and I think you can still register if I'm not mistaken. And so I think you can register up until like an hour before it starts or something like that. So I would encourage everyone to go to NFOIC.org. I believe it's pretty much right at the top, one of the top announcements on the website. And you can go, and if I'm not mistaken, last year they made the recordings available for a while afterwards. Yeah. So even if you're not able to attend the whole thing, you should be able to get the recordings as well. I think there's a small fee. I think it's $35, something like that. Yeah. But it's a wonderful event. The number of experts that they bring in government transparency and government accountability is amazing. You know, I think, you know, it's a small community in a lot of ways. Sometimes government oversight, you know, it's not as big as some of the other topics that people think of when they think about government, but it's a passionate community. And there are really some people that are like Mr. Bevarly that we have tonight. There's some people who are really experts in this, who are just a wealth of knowledge, and being able to learn from them is such a benefit, I think, to all citizens who care about how their government operates. So please do join that summit tomorrow. And Mr. Bevarly, do you have anything else that you would like to let us know? It's almost 8:15. So, you know, I really appreciate you being here and everything that you've told us, and you know, all the insights that you've brought. And so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share anything else, either about Inspectors General or about the work that you do, because you also do very important work as well.
Well, you know, John, again, just to thank you and thank everyone again. When I was at NFOIC, I just always, you know, Catherine and Nick and the group there, they're so responsive to what we were doing. They were very much involved to what was going on. And I think everybody in Delaware, you know, you guys should have large memberships. You should have another zero on your funds that are in the bank there. You all do a lot of heavy lifting. And I think a lot of you all just, you know, looking at the accomplishments that you made, you really need to kind of sit back and appreciate the impact, the positive impact that you had. Like I said, you know, it's the public's interest and the public's well-being, and you all are there, you know, taking care of both of those. So I just really, you know, congratulate you and the work that's going on there, and wish you all the best. And I'll keep following you all to see what's going on up there.
Yeah, and if you
would, I'll get this legislation for next session introduced. I will definitely be interested in following that.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm very excited about our prospects. If you would be able to, could you please put your website in the chat, so that, you know, anyone who's interested will be able to click right on it. And when I send out the link to the recording, I'll make sure I include that, because I want people to know these additional resources that are out there. You know, unfortunately, we don't have a ton of these types of resources in Delaware. And so, you know, anything that's out there, I think Delawareans need to know about. But yeah, so thank you so much. Let me I'll put you back into, I'll remove you out of the spotlight.
Thank you.
But you know, a round of applause for Mr. Bevarly. Thank you so much for joining us and for this insight. And you know, you will be able to share this video of Mr. Bevarly sharing all these insights with anyone once I get that recording out. So thank you again, Mr. Bevarly.
John. You're welcome.
All right, and so for some concluding remarks, once again, I want to thank everyone who attended tonight, everyone who expressed interest tonight and wasn't able to attend, who's watching this on the recording, and especially a massive thanks to Mr. Dan Bevarly for this insightful discussion about how important an inspector general is, as well as how important transparency in our state government is. Thank you as well to all the committee members who helped plan this event. So Catherine, Nick, John Flaherty, and Connie, thank you so much. These events take so much work to put together, and they brought in an excellent speaker and did an excellent job getting this event all put together. Before we conclude, I also would like to invite everyone to our biennial elected officials reception. So every 2 years after the election, we provide an opportunity for the public to meet and greet with their state and local officials. So your state officials, county officials, city officials. This year, the event will be hosted by DelCOG, the Delaware Press Association, the Civic League of Newcastle County, the League of Women Voters of Delaware, and the League of Women Voters of Newcastle County. The event will be held on December 9th at the Ed Oliver Golf Club in Wilmington. There's a $5 cover charge. It's free for elected officials, but for everyone else, a $5 cover charge. There will be hors d'oeuvres there. There's also a cash bar. If you would like to be a co-sponsor of the event, so have your name up on, you know, like a PowerPoint and let people know that you provide a little bit more money to support us, you can let me know, or you can let John Flaherty know. If you send, you know, a contact through our website, I will also forward that on to John. I will also send out an invitation by email in the next few days. And so you can use the link in that email to register for the event. You can also learn more about the elected officials reception on our event page on our website. So delcog.org/events. Finally, a reminder that if anyone would like to join DelCOG and help with our important work, please send us an email or visit our website to learn more, delcog.org/join. As a small, all-volunteer nonprofit organization, the help of every individual can make a huge difference in what we're able to accomplish. So if you would like to join DelCOG, if you would like to volunteer for DelCOG, be on our committees, help with any of our advocacy work, realize that every person that you will make a big difference. Also, finally, I will send out this recording as soon as it is available, as soon as I'm able to. I'm hoping to be able to do that tomorrow. But if I'm not able to do it by tomorrow, I will certainly do it by Monday of next week. So thank you one final time to Mr. Daniel Bevarly. This was such a wonderful and insightful conversation. I hope everyone was able to learn a little bit about DelCOG and what we've done, as well as learn about just the importance of open government. So please, everyone, stay safe and continue pushing for responsible, transparent, accountable, open government. Thank you, everyone, and good night.